You're listening to Juicy Radio. In this episode, you'll hear from Frank Cottle of Alliance Business Centers and GCUCall. Or is it all juicy? We'll settle all that and more on this edition of Juicy Radio, Episode 4. Welcome back to Juicy Radio, everyone. My name is Tony Bacigalupo. You can find out more about me at tonybacigalupo.com or at TonyBeGood on Twitter. And strap in, you've got a really intense and special edition of Juicy Radio this time. I'm interviewing Frank Cottle of Alliance Business Centers, and we get into it. You know, this is an important conversation for me because Frank is someone who has just been eyeball deep in the business center and executive office suite industry for a long time. And that's an industry that I always consider to be something very distinct and different from the world of co-working. Frank believes otherwise, and that put us into a place where we could have a really deep and serious conversation about what it is to be a part of this industry, whether this is all one industry, whether we have a confluence of things going on here. And we dug deep. Normally, I try to be I consider myself to be a nice guy, right? I don't want to be hard on people. But with Frank, I got this sense that I could challenge him. And I really wanted to because for me, I came into the co-working world feeling like this co-working thing could be something that could really stand out and be something more than just what we're used to seeing in typical office rental sort of situations. And Frank is coming in here saying that he thinks we actually have a lot of things in common. And so that's a really challenging thing for me. I think that perhaps co-working, if it's to do what it's really here to do, should be challenging industries like the office rental industry to be more than just an office rental industry. And so we're going to just dive right into all of that in this episode. We had a very long conversation. Our conversation spanned almost an hour and a half, so we had to really chop it down. But what you're going to hear here is some of the most impactful and I think important pieces of that conversation. Frank and I have since talked a lot more. We're working on some ideas together, and you'll be seeing both Frank and I at Juicy, where hopefully we'll be able to continue these kinds of conversations in Los Angeles in May. If you haven't bought your ticket yet for GCUCA in Los Angeles, it's coming up real soon, so get your ticket right now at juicy.co. That's GCUC.co. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Frank.
So what we came up with years ago, we looked at what we felt the industry did. This goes back to about 2003 or 4, maybe before that. We said, you know what, there's this problem describing even business centers or executive suites, you know. And so we said, well, what does it take? What do we all do that we have in common? Well, we combine people, my elevator speech, we combine people, place, and technology into a single, highly flexible service agreement that's more efficient for our client base than using those things independently. Let me give you an example. And then I use Regis or Alliance or New York Cities or anything that's an illustration. They go, oh, I've seen them. Mm-hmm. They didn't really know what we did, but they knew who we were. So it's that combination of people, place, and technology with a highly flexible service agreement. Call it a service agreement, call it a membership agreement, call it a virtual office. It's an agreement. And you take those three ingredients, just like making bread. A little water, a little flour, a little salt, you got bread. Might not be real raised, but you got bread. So it's just simple ingredients that create the industry, automotive industry. A chassis, some wheels, and an engine. It moves people. Take that same concept. So from our perspective, we say that we are all part of the serviced office industry. And people say, oh, no, we don't have offices. Well, you go and you work there. So you could say it's a workspace, but then a lathe operator has a workspace. So you go and you do white collar work on a computer, and it's kind of office oriented. So we say we're the service office industry, but then we have very definitive brand sectors. Each brand sector has its own individual brand promise. So Regis, classic business center, people, place, and technology, plus professional image and services. Co-working center, people, place, and technology, maybe different ratios, but still the same three ingredients. Business growth through a collaborative community. Incubator, add mentoring to either one of those two. Accelerator, add access to capital to an incubator. Logistics center, add assembly and storage capacity to any one of those people, place, and technology models. Media center, culinary center, maker center, blah, 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 blah. Ad infinitum. You're all part of that people, place, and technology structure. That's our industry. So how do we help the customer move from an accelerator to an incubator, from an incubator to a co-working center, then into managed workspace, into serviced office space, business center space, et cetera, as how do we deal with the entire life cycle of the customer's need? And that's the struggle that we've got in front of us.
That's a really compelling question. I think that, anyone who understands this industry understands that, there's a lot of potential and probably a lot of challenges in the transition states when someone is in one particular kind of a facility, but the needs of their business change. They need to move to a different kind of a setup, and that is going to happen many times in the course of a business's lifetime and certainly an individual's lifetime, and how to manage those transitions across different businesses, different business models, different companies. So this is part of what the question that you're intending to tackle by working with GCUC and trying to go sort of to bring all of these folks together into, the equivalent auto industry of all the different kinds of shared workspace environments.
I think so. I mean, we, as an industry, as we go back 37 years now, we look at it and we say, what's the biggest problem that everybody's always had? Mm-hmm. And it's really recognition by the public of first, who we are, second, what we do, and third, the value proposition we provide. It's kind of complicated for the layman or the customer member to figure out sometimes. And simply explaining that or getting recognition for that, it's right now we're sort of in the perfect storm of every company is international these days. Every company has an offshore employee or an offshore customer. Doesn't matter where they are. Every company today has international relationships. Every communication systems today is global. So we're the perfect storm for communications and collaboration. Today, everybody is highly mobile. Hopefully the EU won't get shut down, but the concept of borders, visas, doing business globally allows for that. And that transience in the business model requires even more flexibility than the classic business center industry had in the past.
Yeah.
And a lot of things around co-working, a lot of things about hybrid centers, et cetera. Drop-in, touchdown, all those phrases we've been using since the 90s, they're really starting to hit home now. And that has a huge bearing on the way our industry will continue to work and grow, candidly. We also have the perfect storm of job structure changing. Today, the largest group of new, I won't say jobs, because not really jobs necessarily, but work enterprise is in the form of contractors. So last year, let's say 5 years ago, Cisco hired people. Today they hire contractors. Might be the same person. It might even be in their own office from time to time. But primarily, they recognize that the technology that's available, which is another element of change, allows people to live where they want, work where they want, how they want, as long as they're productive to whoever is paying them.
Mm-hmm.
So contracting is huge. Just look at things like Upwork and Fiverr and all of the big contracting boards, ELANs, that are out there. That people say, hey, I live in Denver and I don't want to move to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I like living in Denver. Period. You don't have to move anymore. You can still get the same job. You don't even have to get on an airplane once a month, probably. So all of these things together are causing real estate, commercial real estate, to be repurposed into serving this new growth market. And our industry is the mechanism for that repurposing. And we do a lot of consulting, and we consult with, I won't say every, but I'll say at least, if you were to take the top 10 or 20 financial institutions, venture funds, the private equity funds in the world, we consult with at least 10 of them, at least half of them. And we had a meeting in London about 6 weeks ago, I guess it was, 8 weeks ago. I was over in London. And in one day, the meeting with 3 different fixed asset managers from 3 of those different companies, the combined portfolios of those 3 asset managers was $3.7 trillion. Okay? These guys are trying to figure out, when Cisco has a full floor in 50 of their buildings, and he's telling them that when they renew, they're going to take half a floor, and they ask why, and they say, well, we're going to have less people requirement here. And then they look and they see that Cisco is hiring, not shrinking their personnel base. And they say, well, what's happening? Where are those people going?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're going into Regis, they're going into WeWork, they're going into Link, they're going into Alliance. That's where they're going. So those same asset managers are coming back to us and people like us saying, how do we get more involved in your industry? So there's never been more access to big capital ever before for our industry as there is now. But certain brands, Regis being a good example, WeWork being another big example, that are able to access that capital are materially outgrowing the industry at large just because they can access the capital. So it's because people recognize the strong brands, but they don't yet recognize the industry. And I made a speech in, when was it? 94, I guess it was, over in London. And I about got thrown off the stage because my opening line was, there are no smart people in our industry. And the essence of the presentation, it was funny because Mark Dixon, the guy who runs Regis, and I were opposed to each other. We're kind of doing a battle of the dummies. My comment was, until our industry defines an exit point for capital, it will achieve no capital. Without capital, we'll never have smart people in our industry because we can't afford to hire them. So we'll stay a mom and pop industry. And those people that have accessed capital have made a lot of money. Those people that have not are still cottage industry. They're still mom and pop.
Right.
So
and you're seeing that now.
The capital's there today. The capital's there today. We just have to, as an industry, get recognized so that we can access it. Then our growth will be 10 times what it's been the last 5 years.
So really it comes down to being able to articulate why these different kinds of spaces really should be recognized as an industry, not even necessarily in the way that it used to be thought of, but in the way that it's becoming thought of as a replacement for what used to be the corporation that would lease and manage the office space. And really this is taking over that. And there are the people who are behind that world, the people who used to lease space to Cisco, are now going to be leasing space to WeWork or to one of your companies.
or to every co-working center, every incubator. Yeah, the whole movement, we've been saying since the late 70s that we're the new way to work. We're still saying that as an industry. Oh yeah, co-working, it's a new way to work. Oh yeah, business center, it's the new way to work. We just even had a whole thing about it's the new way to work.
Yeah.
After 3.5 decades or 4 decades, 5 decades, if you go to the very beginning, the very roots of the industry, we shouldn't be saying we're the new way to work anymore. We should say we are the way to work.
What are these business centers providing to people other than a place to work? How are they demonstrating an interest in and a commitment to people's betterment and success and growth?
Well, I think, number one, the classic business center or executive suite of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000, early 2000, had always been very community-oriented, very networking-oriented in itself. And a lot of the business centers, they look at what the co-working sector is doing, and they simply say, gosh, we do that too. It's just our clients have privacy. So they don't try and rally the clients in the same way that we've seen some of the co-working centers do. But the concept of interaction, people went to a business center for many of the same reasons. They got kind of lonely at home, or their company needed a branch office and it made sense economically and operationally. It was close to where they lived. They liked the team, the staff that ran the place. Kind of good news around the water cooler, conference rooms, meeting rooms, events, activities. Business centers have been doing that in one form or another since the 70s. The difference, I think, is the terminology. Where the classic business centers referred to it as networking. Today, in the world of social officing, if you want to think of it that way, we all refer to it as community. Now, that's really a change in terminology more than a change in activity.
So you're saying that substantially these aren't different in terms of what they're actually doing. It's just a matter of language? Because I find that hard to believe. I feel like I could walk into a business center right now and it'd be an extremely different experience in terms of being able to meet someone, talk to people, have that kind of a thing compared to a co-working space.
It depends on the operator, on both sides, by the way. I've been in and out of co-working centers since they began. I've walked into them and no one has raised an eye and no one has nodded and said hello. And I've worked in them and no one has said, hey, how are you and what do you do? And let's go to lunch. And I've also been into business centers where we took an office or opened an activity and the manager took us around and said, oh, well, you're in this business? Yeah, there's 4 other guys in your industry. Let me introduce you to them.
Would you consider that to be the exception of the rule as far as business centers are concerned?
What I'm saying is it goes both ways. It really comes down to the individual manager style of the company. So I believe that a co-working center physically engenders more activity because of their openness. But we also see in design more and more the co-working centers that are doing extremely well and getting occupancy, and let's use WeWork as an example of that. They're putting up more walls and gaining more privacy for their clients because people realize that the life cycle of the customer is longer, therefore the sustainability of the business is probably better, as a result of which they can scale their company and grow it, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole series of things that say somewhere in the middle, what people call hybrid centers, whatever that means, maybe just like hybrid cars, somewhere in the middle between the gas guzzler and the pure electric car is the happy point. And today, design-wise, maybe it's 60-40, private versus open, or 80-20, or it depends on the marketplace. But we're seeing those types of centers doing exceedingly well by comparison to pure old style. You look like a grandmother decorated at business centers, and totally new, 100% open, feels like a cafeteria co-working centers. There's this proper blend somewhere in the middle that I think is emerging based on customer demand and based on success of the companies themselves.
Right. So what it sounds like is that, there's the traditional old business center image that we're all kind of familiar with, but with the advent of co-working and its growth and its prevalence and the demand for it, business centers are now adapting their models to be more open, to being more conducive to permitting these kinds of environments because of the need for people to have better circumstances in which to connect to each other, which is physically more possible when you're designing with co-working in mind. And that the business center industry is adapting to the fact that its people want more than to just rent facilities from them.
Yeah, I think there's a meeting in the middle, coming both directions, number one. And number two, I don't think the business centers are learning from the co-working centers or vice versa so much as both groups are very carefully listening to their customers, listening to their members. Take a business center. A co-working center. If you owned a co-working center that was 80-20 private and meeting rooms versus open space, and you saw your members coming and going and coming and going, and you looked at the trend and you said, every time somebody gets 5 members in a group to form a company, they leave. What am I going to do about that? I'm going to build team rooms. And the business center says, my clients want more and more to move around, and they use programs like Alliance Access or the Regis Business World Card or different programs. But it'd be nicer if I didn't have to tie up a day office every time somebody stopped in, but I had an open working lounge. I think I'll change my design a little bit. There's just customer flow and thing that we're all learning about, and it's growth together. We keep adapting our designs based upon the successes of operations that are listening to customer demand. We don't invent these things. That's my very opinionated opinion.
So when it comes down to numbers, essentially, doing what the market will pay for ultimately dictates what happens.
Yeah.
So if I'm a business operator and I have a room full of people that want to rent offices and they don't really talk to each other, or maybe sometimes they do a little bit, but I'm making my money, then I'm not really I'm good. I don't really care what else is happening with them or how much we're helping them, be more impactful, so long as they're paying the bills.
Yeah, it really depends on whether. And you've used the term co-working movement, and that's been used a lot, not just by you, but by a lot of people. We used to talk about the flexible officing movement and telecommuting movement. That was real hot in the 80s, and things as well. And so we look about the movement side, and then and we all talk about sustainability in a lot of different contexts. So today, right now, what we're talking about is sustainability in the business context. So rather than participating in a movement for the sake of the movement. And so sustainability in the business context means whatever works.
Sure.
Okay. Can I scale it? Can I grow it? Are my customers happy? Should I build another one? Should I expand this one? Happy clients, whether you're selling hot dogs or 3-star Michelin meals, happy clients are happy clients. So it really comes down to a lot of that overall, and just making sure that you're satisfying that need. And I don't think there's a right or wrong, by the way.
Well, actually, let me push you in that, because I think you may have a good answer to this, and you've used a good analogy there. And I'm really curious. This is actually one I'm most curious about. So you comparing to the food industry, right? You said hot dogs. Let's say I'm a company that wants to sell food. I want to produce food that people will eat, right? I could be selling hot dogs, or I can be selling something that's healthier, right? And you could say, I'm just going to be interested in whatever the customer wants. And so if they want me to sell them the most fat, unhealthy, greasy, terrible food in the world, it doesn't matter as long as I make a profit. But I think what you're saying is that I'm hoping you, and I'm hoping a lot of the other folks that you work with, care about what is happening with the workplace more than to just sell people whatever hot dog they'd be willing to buy. So what does that look like?
Well, I think, number one, and this is kind of ironic because Mark Dixon was originally in the hot dog business.
It doesn't surprise me in the least. That's hilarious.
No, but Mark, let me tell you, and I say this in all sincerity. I've known Mark and Regis since the company was formed. And they've done a good job. They've done an amazing job over a long period of time of solid growth. And while a lot of people look at them as, the 1,000-pound gorilla that they are, they've done that by satisfying customers. And their product is a solid product for a particular sector of customer. And they've done that exceedingly well, at least in my opinion. And I'm not getting paid for this commercial because we compete with them on the street every day.
Hey, and McDonald's does really well in the food industry too.
Yes, but the difference being, you might argue that McDonald's doesn't sell a happy meal, let alone a healthy meal. But there's nothing unhealthy about the Regis product, just like there's nothing unhealthy about the WeWork product. If you were to describe nutrition in food and equate that with efficiency and value in officing or co-working.
Well, I'm thinking about humanity. I'm thinking not just business efficiency, but human needs, right? So a person, we have a lot of people joining the workforce now who are working for themselves for the first time, who are not used to not having the support systems of traditional employment, and whose needs are not going to be met necessarily just by a hospitality provider, but by their peers, right? By the people who are going to support them in that. But they're only going to be able to have that if they're exposed to the opportunity of that in the first place. And I think my concern is that I think a lot of co-working spaces, and especially business centers, but even a lot of co-working spaces like the one you described, leave a lot of that on the table. They're content to let people just rent space and leave a lot of opportunity out to really not just run a workspace, but run a center where people have the understanding that this is a place that they can find other people who can help them grow and help them to expand and help them to be happier in their lives. And I feel like there's such a huge missed opportunity there. And I'm wondering if you are seeing, or if you yourself feel this desire or this need or this responsibility as this industry grows to do something about that, to take an active leadership in bringing that forward.
I really do. I think that our responsibility in life is to leave things better than we found them. And so every industry needs to progress. And we talked about the automotive industry. Well, are cars safer today than they were in 1966 when the business center industry more or less started? Yeah, I'd say they're better. So, and I'd say our industry is much better too. What we have to do is look at the customer, and they have social needs. They also have business needs, and a lot of technology needs that come along with that, and other things. So you're always going to be looking to get that mix together just right. And very few people will have it, and it will change constantly. But I think the industry at all levels, not levels, at all sectors, is constantly determining or attempting to determine how can I help my clients be more efficient and better at what they do. Now, what they do can be different in different centers. Their needs can be different in different centers. But it's a constant striving to determine how to improve the life and therefore the value, because value is not just economic, of the entire relationship between the center and its customer or member, client, whatever term we want to use.
Hey gang, Tony here, real quick break. I know that the analogy between food and nutrition and the workspace and shared workspace industry is not a perfect analogy. And Frank makes a good point. Traditional office rental spaces are not nearly as bad for you as hot dogs. However, I do think that there is something to be said here about the value of learning what it is to have a healthy and balanced lifestyle in the world of work, especially in a world where we're responsible for it now. And while a traditional office rental situation, if all they're doing is giving people what they want and all people know to ask for is privacy, then I am very certain that we are missing out on all sorts of other really important parts of the worker's equivalent of a food pyramid. But Frank does agree that we can't just stop at offering people workspace.
As an industry, we have to do even more than provide a new way to work. I think it's almost our obligation, and it's one of our goals, is to create a structure and a foundation, if you will, for the industry that allows us to literally save the world one office or one workspace or membership at a time by donating out space to worthy charitable causes to help elevate not just the people in the centers, but the communities within which we live. And I think that's something, if we're going to gain recognition as an industry, it shouldn't just be because we're the new way to work. It should be because we're the new world within which to work. And that's something we're quite capable of, and having a material impact in every market where any type of serviced office center exists.
The conversation was really challenging for me because I really believe in what's possible with this movement. And when it comes down to it, so long as what we are doing comes down in hard numbers to serving the needs of the customer, and the customer, all they know is to pay for renting space, then it's always going to be an uphill battle to do more than that. So if you're a co-working space owner, I think the challenge in front of you is to understand how exactly are you going to be more than just a place where people pay you to work in your space. And not just that, you can answer that question, but how do you institutionalize it? How do you institutionalize it in such a way that even when you've got a bunch of members, they're paying for their memberships, and everything seems to be going smoothly, you're still going for something more? Because renting office space maybe isn't as bad as selling hot dogs, but there are definitely more nutritious ways to help this new workforce be a better and healthier place for the world. So what does that look like for you? What kind of a restaurant do you want to run? What kind of a meal do you want to serve up there? Or, more apt in this situation, what kind of stuff do you want to be teaching people how to serve to each other? It's an open question. Let's talk about how to build communities that could never be confused with office centers. Let's talk about how to build communities of people where the reason they're getting together isn't because they want to rent office space, but because they want to support each other in new ways, in better ways, because they want to build cultures of mutuality. The Freelancers Union uses a great term, new mutualism. Mutualism, the idea that we're in this together and we have economies of interdependence and support on one another. These are the kinds of things that we need to be talking about. Come to GCUC in Los Angeles. Join the conversation online. The Co-working Google group is a great place for this. Go to coworking.com. It's just been redesigned. Great quick little portal to get you to the other resources of the co-working movement. But let's have some serious conversations about how to be more than just workspace. For GCUC Radio, my name is Tony Bacigalupo, and hopefully I'll see you in Los Angeles. Until next time, vive la co-working.